Can you picture reaching the height of international fame? Music videos in heavy rotation, global tours spanning continents, record executives negotiating seven-figure contracts behind closed doors, only to step back and willingly walk away from it all? Not because you failed. Not because the audience disappeared. But because something inside you shifted so dramatically that applause no longer felt like oxygen. What would have to happen in your life for money, recognition, and influence to suddenly feel insignificant? This isn't simply a story about celebrity. It's about survival. It's about grief that arrives in waves so relentless they reshape your identity. It's about standing at the peak of your profession and realizing that the summit isn't where you're meant to stay. It's the story of Papa San, born Tyrone Thompson, a dancehall powerhouse who dominated the late 1980s and 1990s before making a decision that stunned fans, executives, and fellow artists alike. But before we reach that turning point, there are two moments you must understand. One involves a loaded gun pressed to his head during a police raid, an officer pulling the trigger. The other begins with a phone call while he's on tour, a single sentence that fractures his world beyond repair. And if you've ever experienced a season when success couldn't shield you from pain, this story may feel uncomfortably familiar. Growing up where survival was the priority. Papa San was born on July 1, 1967, in Kingston, Jamaica, and raised in Spanish Town, an area where political unrest and street violence were part of daily reality. For many children there, the sound of gunfire was not shocking. It was routine. Imagine being a boy who already understands which alleyways to avoid. Who knows which colors, which corners, which gatherings could mean danger. How does that shape your dreams? Does it make you cautious or fearless? He was raised by his Rastafarian grandmother, a woman of quiet strength who provided spiritual grounding in a community marked by instability. There were rules in her house. Discipline. Structure. A moral compass that tried to counterbalance what the streets taught. But outside that front door was a different classroom. Spanish Town in the 1970s and 80s was politically divided. Communities were often aligned with rival factions. Violence could erupt without warning. Young boys learned early that reputation could protect you, or destroy you. Yet in the middle of that tension, there was music. His father operated a sound system known as Black Universe. In Jamaica, a sound system isn't just equipment. It's identity. It's competition. It's culture. It's community power. Speakers stacked high. Vinyl records spinning. Crowds gathering in anticipation. Microphones passed between vocalists hungry to prove themselves. Young Tyrone watched. Listened. Studied. He learned timing from selectors. He learned crowd control from seasoned DJs. He learned that confidence on a microphone could transform a skinny teenager into a commanding presence. Have you ever noticed how adversity sometimes produces extraordinary focus? When survival is the backdrop, talent can feel like an escape route. By his early teens, he wasn't just observing. He was performing. Sound clashes were brutal. There was no room for hesitation. One lyrical stumble and the crowd would turn. But Papa San had something different. Agility. He could sing sweet melodies one moment and switch to rapid-fire delivery the next. He bent rhythms, played with cadence, experimented fearlessly. Long before versatility became a marketing term, he was living it. Was it ambition, or was it survival instinct disguised as ambition? Rising through dancehall's golden era. By the late 1980s, dancehall was exploding. Jamaica's gritty rhythm-heavy evolution of reggae was pushing boundaries sonically and lyrically. And Papa San was not just participating. He was dominating. He earned titles like Dancehall DJ of the Year. His performances became electrifying events. Crowds didn't simply attend. They anticipated. He toured internationally, Japan, Europe, Africa, South America. Each stop expanded his reach. Each show reinforced his reputation. In Japan, audiences who didn't even speak Jamaican patois memorized his lyrics phonetically. In Europe, underground clubs pulsed to his voice. In the United States, hip-hop artists were taking notice. He collaborated with major American acts, including Run DMC and the Fat Boys. At a time when cross-genre partnerships were still experimental, Papa San moved fluidly between reggae and hip-hop spaces. MTV exposure widened his audience. Record labels circled. In 1990, he signed with Power Records. Later, he partnered with VP Records, a dominant force in reggae distribution. At one point, negotiations reportedly placed his value at $1 million, a staggering figure for a dancehall artist in that era. Pause for a moment. If you grew up watching your community struggle for basic stability, what does it feel like to suddenly negotiate million-dollar deals? Does it feel like validation? Victory? Proof that you escaped? Or does it create a different kind of pressure? The fear of losing it all? Because success doesn't silence trauma. It often amplifies what you haven't healed. The phone call that broke the illusion. December 21st, 1993. Papa San was on tour, immersed in the rhythm of performance. Sound checks, interviews, late-night travel, hotel rooms blending together. Then the phone rang. Have you ever answered a call and instantly felt your body tense, before words even registered? The news that came through that line marked the beginning of a devastating chapter. Within 3 years, he would lose 14 family members. 14. Let that number settle. His sister died in a motorcycle accident. A cousin was killed by police. Other relatives were lost to violence and tragedy. Each loss compounded the previous one. Grief rarely arrives politely. It storms in. It disrupts. It lingers. For a public figure, there's an added complication. The world still expects performance. You still step on stage. You still smile for cameras. You still deliver energy. But internally, something fractures. Anger began replacing sorrow. In communities shaped by violence, revenge can feel like justice. He received threats. Fear mixed with rage. He applied for a firearm license and was denied. He carried a weapon anyway. In 1994, he was arrested on illegal weapons charges. Headlines shifted tone. Endorsements evaporated. A Pepsi commercial opportunity vanished. Industry relationships cooled. Imagine building a career for over a decade, and watching momentum stall because of one season of instability. Would you blame him? Or would you say he should have known better? And deeper still, how many people self-destruct not because they lack opportunity, but because they're drowning internally? The gun that didn't fire. Then came the night that defied explanation. During a police raid, an officer pointed a loaded gun directly at Papa San's head and pulled the trigger. It malfunctioned. In that same incident, his cousin was killed. He survived. Whether you interpret that as coincidence, mechanical failure, or divine intervention, the psychological impact is undeniable. Imagine hearing the click of a weapon that should have ended your life. Imagine realizing you're still breathing. Why him? Why not both? What separates survival from tragedy in moments like that? Near-death experiences have a way of stripping illusion. They force confrontation with mortality. They expose how fragile success truly is. But transformation doesn't always happen immediately. He continued performing, continued touring, continued releasing music. Externally, he remained Papa San, the energetic dancehall star. Internally, depression deepened. Success without satisfaction. By 1997, he had what most aspiring artists crave: recognition, financial reward, influence, and a global audience. Yet he later described himself as deeply depressed. Have you ever reached a milestone and felt strangely empty? When the noise fades, when the crowd disperses, when you're alone in a hotel room thousands of miles from home, who are you without the stage? The internal prompting began subtly. A growing sense that something was misaligned. That despite surviving violence and loss, he was not at peace. When he returned to Jamaica, that inner conviction intensified. He spoke with his wife of 13 years. These weren't casual conversations. They were heavy, honest, uncertain. What happens when your entire identity is built around performance, and you begin questioning whether you're meant to continue? For many, midlife becomes a mirror. You review the choices behind you and ask whether they still serve who you're becoming. Papa San found himself at that crossroads. A quiet decision that echoed loudly. In 1997, on an ordinary weekday, he walked into Portmore Baptist Church. No cameras. No headlines. No strategic announcement. Pastor Winston Smith was ministering. And there, quietly, he made a decision to surrender his life to Christ. Regardless of personal belief, what followed was significant. He described the depression lifting, the anger that once consumed him easing, the internal chaos calming. The following week, he honored a previously scheduled 3-week secular tour in Japan. He attempted to tone down explicit content, but internally, clarity had arrived. When the tour ended, he told his team, "I'm done. I'm not going back." 5 words. 5 words that dismantled years of momentum. Think about that courage. Not forced retirement. Not industry rejection. A voluntary departure at the height of relevance. Would you walk away from $1 million trajectory for something intangible like peace? Reinvention in midlife. For those in their 40s, 50s, or beyond, this may resonate differently. Reinvention is often marketed as a young person's privilege. But clarity often comes with age. Papa San didn't add a faith-based side project to his brand. He pivoted entirely, shifting to gospel music and ministry. Financial risk. Yes. Industry skepticism? Absolutely. Fans confused? Without question. But he pursued alignment over applause. Is success defined by visibility, or by integrity? Is legacy measured in charts, or in transformation? He chose a different stage. A different audience. A different purpose. The deeper question. From the streets of Spanish Town to international tours. From million-dollar negotiations to near-fatal encounters. From depression to surrender. Whether you share his faith or not, the courage to abandon guaranteed validation is rare. At 20, success may mean recognition. At 40 or 50, success often means alignment. Public identity matching private conviction. So let me ask you, if everything you worked for suddenly felt hollow, would you have the courage to choose differently? If survival gave you a second chance, would you cling to status, or pursue peace? And perhaps the most important question of all. When the gun clicks and you're still here, what do you do with the life you've been given? Stories like this challenge us not merely to watch from a distance, but to examine ourselves in the mirror they quietly hold up. Because sometimes the greatest triumph isn't climbing higher, earning louder applause, or expanding your influence. It's recognizing the moment when the ladder you're on is leaning against the wrong wall, and having the courage to step down. And that's what makes the journey of Papa San unforgettable. For decades, the gospel music world has wrestled with one persistent, often heated question. How far is too far when it comes to sound? At what point does cultural expression cross the invisible line into compromise? And who gets to draw that line? When Jamaican dancehall icon Papa San made his dramatic shift from secular stardom to gospel ministry in the late 1990s, the backlash was swift, emotional, and loud. Churches objected. Critics complained. Gospel traditionalists folded their arms and shook their heads. That's not church music, some insisted. You can't preach the gospel over dancehall rhythms. That beat belongs to the streets, not the sanctuary. But pause for a moment. Hasn't every generation said the same thing about the music that followed it? Country gospel once faced resistance for sounding too rural and unrefined. R&B gospel was criticized for bringing nightclub textures into church pews. Hip-hop gospel was labeled rebellious, disruptive, even disrespectful. Each new style carried the same accusation. This doesn't belong here. And yet, over time, those styles found their place. They didn't destroy the church. In many cases, they expanded it. So what was really at stake when Papa San crossed that line? To understand the magnitude of his decision, you have to understand who he was before the conversion. Born Tyrone Thompson in Kingston, Jamaica, Papa San rose during a golden era of dancehall. His lyrical agility, rapid fire, breathless, almost acrobatic, set him apart. Long before speed rap became a buzzword in American hip-hop, he was bending syllables and accelerating rhythms with a precision that felt almost supernatural. His delivery wasn't just fast, it was controlled chaos, a musical sprint that never stumbled. By the mid-1990s, he wasn't just another artist. He was a force. MTV rotation introduced him to global audiences. Major labels courted him with contracts promising worldwide expansion. The industry machinery was ready to propel him into a different stratosphere. He had what artists dream of: timing, talent, traction. Then, in 1997, everything changed. There was no carefully staged press conference. No farewell tour with emotional final bows. No strategic, soft launch into inspirational music. He didn't ease into gospel as a side project. He didn't hedge his bets. He walked away. At the height of his career. And here's the question that lingers. How many people do you know who voluntarily leave when the spotlight is brightest? For most of us, success is addictive. Recognition affirms us. Applause validates us. The checks certainly help. Walking away feels irrational, almost irresponsible. But Papa San would later describe his decision not as a sacrifice, but as a surrender. He had experienced what he called a complete spiritual transformation. To him, it wasn't a genre shift. It was a life shift. The reaction from the secular industry ranged from disbelief to quiet amusement. Some predicted it would last 2 weeks. Others gave him 2 months before the pull of fame dragged him back. After all, music is more than income. It's identity. Could he really silence the persona that built his career? Meanwhile, inside church circles, suspicion brewed. Dancehall rhythms carried cultural associations that many believers struggled to separate from nightlife and excess. Could the same beat that once energized party crowds carry the message of redemption? But Papa San wasn't thinking about critics on either side. He was thinking about teenagers. He remembered young people growing up in Christian homes who loved reggae and dancehall rhythms, but had no faith-based alternative. They weren't necessarily rebelling against God. They were responding to the only musical options available to them. If the church refused to speak their language, someone else would. So he created a space. In 1999, he released his first gospel album, Victory. It didn't slip quietly into obscurity. It made noise. It forced a conversation. It signaled that this transition wasn't temporary. It was intentional. Then something remarkable happened. 7 consecutive Billboard Top 10 gospel albums followed. Let that settle for a moment. A reggae artist from Jamaica, without the marketing budgets of major American gospel powerhouses, competing directly against established U.S. gospel giants, and consistently landing in the top 10. This wasn't novelty curiosity. It was sustained impact. By February 2014, his album One Blood reached #1 on the Billboard Reggae Albums chart and eventually went double platinum. Awards and nominations followed: Stellar Awards recognition, Dove Award nods, Soul Train acknowledgements. The industry that once questioned his pivot began to respect it. But here's something worth reflecting on. What does success mean when it comes after sacrifice? Because Papa San had already relinquished something enormous. The secular world never forgot him. In December 2025, artists such as Busta Rhymes and Sean Paul publicly credited Papa San as a foundational influence on modern dancehall flow and rapid-fire rap delivery. His imprint on hip-hop's evolution was undeniable. Even without new secular releases, his style lived on in global music culture. He could have capitalized on that nostalgia. Reunion tours generate millions. Anniversary editions revive careers. Fans would pack arenas to hear the classics. Promoters would line up with lucrative offers. Yet 28 years later, he has not returned, not even once, to perform his old secular hits. Why? That question refuses to disappear. By his own testimony, the desire for that former life is gone. Not suppressed. Not managed. Gone. And that raises an uncomfortable reflection for the rest of us. What would it take to close a profitable chapter of your life permanently? Could you resist the applause if it no longer aligned with your convictions? His personal life reflected the same decisiveness. Shortly after his conversion, he married Debbie. "I'm not taking any chances," he reportedly said, recognizing the instability that fame can inject into relationships. They built a life anchored in faith and intentionality. 6 children, nearly 3 decades of marriage, and a ministry that prioritized family over platform. In a world where celebrity marriages often collapse under pressure, longevity becomes its own quiet testimony. Their son, Beam, Tyrone Thompson, would later become a respected producer and songwriter in the secular industry, collaborating with global figures like Beyoncé and Justin Bieber. The musical DNA clearly carried forward, but expressed differently. Isn't that an intriguing paradox? A father who leaves secular fame, and a son who thrives within it. Yet rather than tension, there appears to be mutual respect. It suggests that transformation is personal, not coercive. Conviction cannot be inherited, it must be chosen. When Papa San returned to Uganda, not as a dancehall superstar but as a gospel minister, the reception stunned observers. Massive crowds gathered. In Nigeria, the pattern repeated. In Malawi, over 500,000 people attended his event, making him the first international artist to perform there. Sound systems were transported from South Africa just to accommodate the scale. The secular fame had been impressive. The gospel reach was immeasurable. But perhaps what distinguishes his ministry most is not the crowd size. It's the posture. Throughout his gospel career, he has collaborated with more than 70 artists across continents, cultures, and generations. Established vocalists, underground poets, choir directors from small-town congregations, young musicians recording their very first single. He does not approach ministry as competition, nor does he treat collaboration as strategy. He does not guard the spotlight as if it were fragile property. Instead, he widens it. He elevates others, shares platforms, and mentors emerging voices with the patience of someone who understands both applause and obscurity. Spend time with him backstage and you will notice something unusual. While others might review streaming numbers or negotiate billing order, he asks different questions. Who needs prayer tonight? Which church is struggling? Which young artist is doubting their calling? His language is not about market share. It is about stewardship. In an industry frequently driven by branding, image control, and relentless self-promotion, that approach stands out sharply. He doesn't aggressively market his music inside churches. There are no elaborate merchandise pitches mid-sermon, no emotional manipulation disguised as fundraising theatrics. He focuses on service, outreach programs in underserved neighborhoods, discipleship initiatives for new believers, marriage counseling sessions that stretch late into the evening. That rhythm of service did not emerge overnight. It was forged through contrast, through the memory of another life. Before the pulpits and prayer circles, there were neon lights and thunderous speakers. Before worship sets, there were dancehall stages vibrating beneath packed crowds. As Papa San, he once stood at the center of Jamaica's explosive music movement, his rapid-fire delivery electrifying audiences from Kingston to New York. His cadence was studied, imitated, remixed. Producers sought his voice because it carried urgency. Promoters booked him because he guaranteed movement. He remembers those nights vividly, the bass reverberating through his chest, the roar of thousands chanting his lyrics back to him, the intoxicating certainty that he was ascending towards something massive. Success was not theoretical. It was measurable. Album sales climbed. Tours expanded. His name traveled faster than he could. And yet, in hotel rooms after concerts, there were moments when the silence felt heavier than the applause had been loud. What is success when the lights shut off? Who are you when the crowd goes home? If your public image thrives but your private soul withers, which one is real? Those questions did not disappear. They intensified. His decision to leave secular dancehall at the height of visibility confused many and angered others. Industry insiders whispered that it was temporary. Critics predicted a short-lived experiment. Friends cautioned him about financial consequences. After all, global superstardom was within reach. Why step away when the machine was finally accelerating? But for him, it was not a strategic pivot. It was surrender. He has described it as a death of the old self and the birth of a new life. Not a cosmetic adjustment. Not a genre shift for niche appeal. A reorientation of identity. That reorientation began reshaping everything, including how he viewed money. Financially, estimates today place his net worth between $1 and $5 million, Respectable, especially within gospel music, though modest compared to mainstream entertainment moguls. It is comfortable, but not extravagant. Sustainable, but not empire-building. Yet here is what quietly astonishes those who know him personally. He still receives royalty checks from the 20 secular albums he recorded during his dancehall years. And he gives that money away. To charities serving vulnerable families. To church benevolence funds covering rent and medical emergencies. To homeless individuals he encounters personally, sometimes quietly pressing folded bills into hands without cameras or announcements. Every dollar. Consider that carefully. It is one thing to give from surplus, when generosity feels like trimming excess. It is another to give from something you have intentionally renounced. Those royalty checks are not merely income, they are reminders. Echoes of a former identity. Tangible evidence of a path he chose to leave. What does generosity look like when it costs you nothing? And what does it look like when it represents the life you walked away from? For him, giving is not punishment for the past. It is purification of it. It is stewardship over what once defined him. His service extends deeply into marriage ministry. After nearly 3 decades with his wife, he authored a practical marriage guide. Less theoretical theology and more lived testimony. The book does not pretend that longevity equals perfection. It speaks candidly about disagreements, seasons of financial strain, pressures of public life, and the discipline required to keep Christ at the center. He writes about choosing humility over pride in arguments. About protecting time from relentless travel schedules. About praying together when feelings fluctuate. About how commitment is not sustained by romance alone but by daily decisions. For a generation navigating rising divorce rates and relational fatigue, that contribution may be as impactful as any album he has released. Couples have approached him after conferences with tears in their eyes, explaining that they were weeks away from separation. Pastors have requested bulk copies for premarital counseling. Young husbands have asked him privately how to lead without dominating. He answers not as a celebrity dispensing wisdom from distance, but as a man who has wrestled, failed, learned, and recommitted. On January 1, 2026, he released his 9th gospel album, My Worship. The timing felt intentional, a new year symbolizing renewed devotion. The project includes collaborations with international and African artists, including rising vocalist Tiffany Hall on the track, Don't Worry. The production reflects maturity. There is less urgency to prove stylistic versatility, less experimentation for novelty's sake. The emphasis is devotion. The melodies breathe. The lyrics linger. The arrangements create space rather than spectacle. This release is not chasing charts. It is cultivating worship. And yet, the influence of his earlier career cannot be erased. 2 legacies now coexist within one man. The secular Papa San influenced a generation of rappers and DJs. His rapid-fire delivery shaped modern flow patterns in dancehall and hip-hop. His rhythmic precision became part of the architecture of global music. Even artists who never met him carry echoes of his style in their cadences. The gospel Papa San has influenced thousands to reconsider faith, to reconcile families, to reevaluate priorities. In remote villages, his testimony has drawn listeners who had never entered a church. In crowded city auditoriums, professionals burdened by invisible anxiety have found language for surrender. So which legacy carries more weight? The awards, the platinum plaques, the public recognition, or the unseen lives changed in hospital rooms, prison chapels, and small congregations? For a mature audience, many of whom have built careers, raised children, accumulated achievements, his story resonates differently. Because at some point, we all conduct an internal audit. What have I gained? What has it cost me? If I achieved everything on my professional checklist but neglected my soul, would it feel like success? He speaks often about that audit. During concerts, he weaves testimony between melodies. He may begin with a song but pause midway to share a memory, of nearly losing himself in ambition, of kneeling in prayer when clarity finally came. His concerts are not performances designed for adoration. They are gatherings that invite reflection. In those moments, audiences grow quiet, not because the music demands silence, but because conviction does. He tours today not seeking applause, but pointing audiences toward the faith that transformed him. He understands the mechanics of stage presence. He once mastered them. But now he uses them differently. Instead of drawing attention inward, he redirects it upward.